Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Cricket Chai Chit Chat, a special program brought to you by a set of cricket fans. We are four of us: myself, Jitu, Bashir, Achal Rangaswamy, and Ravinder Chaubal. Four of us known to each other for the last 30, 35 years, worked together at one time, but never worked together after that. But we have connected and we have bonded together because of one religion, which is cricket. This is where we are, and we decided that we will talk about those cricketers who were the lesser morsels. Well, they were greats in their own way, but at the same time, probably did not get the due that they deserved. And these are the underdogs that we commonly call them. And we started this program to talk from a fan's perspective. We have a lot of programs which happen where you have cricketers talking about themselves, but this time around we said we should be talking from a fan's perspective, because at the end of it, there are millions and millions of fans, but there is only that one cricketer who's there. What we did was we started this initiative last week. And we were very, very lucky to start with a very well-known cricketer of his times, Salim Durrani. And we were even more lucky because we were able to get Mr. Salim Durrani live with us. So that is where it helped us a lot, and we were able to take it to the next level. Today, we are going to be talking about another great, and that great happens to be Mr. S Venkataraghavan, the well-known fourth pillar of the spin quartet that India had. And we have a very special guest here today with us, Rangachari Madhavan. He will be telling you more about himself. I can only say that he was very, very lucky to have played under the captainship of Mr. Venkataraghavan in the Ranji Trophy. Madhavan has played Ranji Trophy for Tamil Nadu. And today we will be talking to him about it. We were expecting Mr. Karsan Ghavri, yet another great from Indian cricket, to join in. I think he's trying to join in. If we are lucky, he will be able to. He has some internet issues, and that is the reason why he's not been able to join us yet. Well, as and when he comes in, we will be more than happy to take him in. But we shall now start. And I would like to first of all invite Mr. Rangachari Madhavan to very briefly introduce himself and share the years that he played, where all did he play, how did cricket get into his blood, and why did cricket get out of his blood if it did. An unknown fact about Madhavan is that he is a chartered accountant by profession, and I think that is where he gets his bread and butter from. So the cheese was cricket for sure, and I think it continues to be cricket. So Madhavan, welcome to this episode of Cricket Chai Chit Chat, and I'm sure we're going to have some very interesting moments discussing about your experiences with Mr. Venkataraghavan during your playing years.
Thank you very much. It is wonderful to be part of this group.
Speak up. Madhavan, why don't you introduce yourself to everyone? Which are the years that you played? How did you go about it?
Yeah. It's wonderful to be here, and thank you very much for calling me. Well, my Ranji Trophy debut was in the year 82-83, but then the association with the legend Venkataraghavan was much earlier because, in fact, I played the first league match in the senior division here under him. So it was really baptism by fire, and I mean that in a very positive sense, because it instilled very high standards in terms of concentration and commitment, which has stood me well not only on the field but off it as well. So my debut was in 82-83, and I retired in 92, and it was quite a journey, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. A couple of summers I spent in Scotland, which also, really made the experience a lot more wider and more varied.
Great. Uh, Bashir, why don't you ask some questions of Madhavan with respect to Venkataraghavan? Bashir, you're mute.
Last week, we had a panelist, Shishir Attangali. He quit cricket at 29. And today we have a panelist who also quit at 29. So, what is this magic figure of 29? Why do people quit at 29? That's my first question to you. Most Englishmen make their debut at 29.
Sorry, not exactly 29. When I retired, I was 32.
Okay, sorry.
And it's more it's a personal decision, because you reach a point where you think, either that you can't play further cricket or go higher up the ladder, or it could be other pursuits as well. And I mean, many of us know, all of us know that in India, especially in those days, we are talking about the 80s, 90s, it was only after 2000 that the scenario changed. So you had to play for India for some length of time, 5 years or 10 years, before you can think of making it, a livelihood. And thankfully, I had qualified by then. I managed to finish my CA and my cost accounting as well. So when it came to a stage where I thought my chances of playing beyond, I mean, playing for India were receding, I thought it's better to concentrate on the profession and then get on with life. And no regrets.
Okay. Okay. Had you played Test cricket, you would have been the only Test cricketer who was a chartered accountant. Indian Test cricketer. I think so. Is that right?
I'm not sure about Dilip Doshi, whether he was a qualified
He was
accountant.
not. He was not a chartered accountant.
Okay. Yes, probably, yes.
Okay. Now, my next question about Venkat. What are the two things that you admired in Venkataraghavan, since you're so closely associated?
Yes, the first thing which I would like to mention is, he was a person who was, totally and thoroughly involved in what he was doing. He had to give 100%, and never have I seen him falter in that. And the corollary to that is he expected the same of all his teammates. And I mean, I know this has evoked different sort of emotions from different people, but I look on it very, very positively, because once you enter the field, for him it was sacred. And but that stopped the moment you left the field at 5, and he was always accessible, provided you were prepared to go and have a chat with him on any topic under the sun. So that was one aspect. The other thing was, his commitment was total, and he could never tolerate anybody whom he felt was not giving 100%. Especially when it came to fielding, you just had to be there. Concentration had to be at its peak. So if that was something that was lacking, somehow he could never forgive. I mean, you can get away with being a mediocre bowler or a batsman, but not a fielder who would not give 100%. That was one aspect. The other aspect was in terms of his, professionalism. I define it in a different way, in the sense that anything that he did, he had to do it well to the best of his abilities. And for such a personality like him, it just didn't remain on the field. He was, I think all of us are aware that he was a brilliant engineer. He had a long corporate career which somehow faded into the background, because he, if I remember right, he joined India Cements as an engineer. He worked for Parry. He worked for India Pistons later. In fact, he did some wonderful job work in India Pistons. Even today, there is a factory at Maraimalai Nagar, which is called IP Rings. It's a listed company, and everybody in the know-how is aware that but for Venkataraghavan, it couldn't have happened in such a short time and in such a organized, excellent manner. And the factory is really going great guns now. So he had that ability, when not only an ability, a commitment. Anything he did, whether it was umpiring, whether he was the whatever be his position in any hierarchy, It was 100% from him, and he had to excel in what he did. It was his own personal standard, and I think that rubbed off on quite a few of us. And really, we are. I'll be very honest in saying, but for certain high standards instilled by him, probably couldn't have managed, a profession as a chartered accountant as well as cricket. And in quite a few months or years, it really did overlap. It was quite tough. But then he was such a shining example, and it was quite handy that you had such a person. But he would not advise you. It was up to you to look up to him. You go ask him, he'll give you advice. But then you had to watch and learn. And that is something which probably will come up further in our conversation as well.
Okay, that's very nice, Madhavan. Very well put. These are aspects of Venkataraghavan which we probably common people are not aware of. So, and these are the valuable insights that you're giving us into a personality whom we have only known on the field. Amazing things to learn. I mean, imagine in the 60s is when he started playing, and played through 70s, and he was a guy who was so much particular about fielding, which probably was the weakest link of Indian cricket at that time during that tenure. So it's amazing. Ravin, I'm sure you have something to talk about Venkat, and then obviously ask Madhavan about some of the questions.
Yeah. In fact, I would like to ask questions straight away to Mr. Madhavan. You have played under the captainship of Venkataraghavan, right? As you have mentioned. Could you tell us how was he as a captain on the field and off the field as a person?
Well, on the field, it was, a single-mindedness of purpose. And, there are cricketers, well, even individuals, we all have our own individual personalities, and no two are alike. So his thing was slightly different. You had to understand the man. And for him, you have to measure up to certain things. Like he wouldn't select you unless he thought you were good enough for it. Point one. So
Okay.
if you entered the arena, you get selected for the state. It means he has seen something in you that satisfies that particular norm, which means that you have to take it. I mean, you can't take the heat. Then he's made a mistake himself, which probably manifested in certain outbursts. But he thought he had it in you, so you don't expect him to spoon feed anything. You can watch, you can ask him questions. He was always accessible, and you had to be at your highest, at least during the time when you were on the field. It was there. It was the unwritten rule. You dare not give anything less than 100%. Point one. Secondly, in terms of strategy, in terms of a lot of people talk about the cerebral thing. That was never advertised. It was understated. He just expected you to watch, like, reading the progress of a game. He thought it was up to you to read it. He'll not come and explain the entire situation. If at all he did, it would be in a few words. It would be a cryptic clue. It's for you to take it up and then fulfill whatever was required of you. That was typical, and agreed. He was a very, very cerebral person, and it required a little bit of looking beyond just the obvious to find out what was happening and what he required you to do. I'd put it that way.
Right.
Good.
And
Ranga,
as a person off the field, what do you think about him?
Off the field, he was quite friendly. On the contrary, it was not the same person on the field. He was accessible, but he would expect you to go. I mean, after we were juniors, I don't know about the peer-to-peer relationship. But as juniors, you go and say, "Can I have a few words with you?" More than welcome. And you could discuss anything. You can discuss his own cricket, what he went through, which sometimes came across some very, very interesting what are the happenings on the field. So he was always accessible, but people didn't feel comfortable, which unfortunately led to wrong perceptions. I put it that way.
And I have one more question to ask, Mr. Madhavan. Do you recall any special experiences or any special incidents which you liked the most about Venkataraghavan?
Yeah, I'll just enlarge about one point that I mentioned about this cryptic clue. You know, this particular, I think two of my fellow cricketers, I think it was W. Raman and C.S. Suresh Kumar also were around, and there was something about the front foot the landing of the front foot for a spinner. And as usual, Venki was watching quietly from the background, and then I think he told Raman, "Plant your foot and bowl." Front foot, he meant. And it took us a bit of time to figure out what is he talking about. We know plants and trees and creepers and all that, but in bowling, plant, then only it requires that. This is exactly what I mentioned. If you really think about it, we did discuss it, and then we realized it was a phenomenal thing. See, for a spinner, unlike a fast bowler, you require the front foot, and there is a fraction of a pause. What the pause does is it enables your hips to come into play. You swivel on the hips, and then you pivot on the toe. Now, when you plant your foot, this makes it easier rather than a hurried, action and a follow through. But this is what typically he would not spoon feed it. It's for you to figure out what he meant, and when you finally do it, it gives a tremendous amount of satisfaction. So, and another thing is, I'd like to, since we've been so serious, relate a particular humorous incident. I mean, this happened when his playing days were almost over. We were playing. I wasn't playing that particular match for India Pistons, and it happened at the Chepauk Stadium when we were playing. India Pistons was playing a league match. So there was this character in India Pistons team who was, he was a loudspeaker. Even if he whispers, the entire ground would hear it. And he was a very funny guy. He had his own sense of wit and humor. I don't want to mention his name. But then there was this incident after lunch. When immediately after lunch, Venki was bowling, he dropped the sitter at short leg. And I don't have to mention what happened after that. But then after a pause, he went up to the umpire and told him, "Sir, is there not any law in the in cricket where you can pull up an abusive bowler?" And what happened is the entire field, other than Venki, erupted. Venki didn't hear it properly. So I believe the whole everybody was laughing. And then Venki found the batsman laughing, the umpires laughing, the fielders laughing. He said, "What's happening? Let me also laugh. Tell me what's happened." And who would dare tell him this? So that's a typical thing. Rarely does it happen, but it happened in this case.
Great, Madhavan. In fact, it set me thinking whilst you were talking that on the field, probably I can relate the behavior of Venkat uh, very close to that of Dhoni. Because Dhoni has been that kind of a captain that he's not really bothered about going and walking up to a bowler to tell him how to bowl the next ball. At least in the initial phases of his captainship. He started doing that in IPL of late. And when the Chahals and the Kuldeep Yadav of the came into the scene. But prior to that, he would not do that. And in fact, I had met him once personally. He happened to be the brand ambassador for a company that I worked for. And I asked him, I said, "Why is it that you don't go and tell the guy, what is wrong and how he should be bowling it right?" So his response was that before the match, everybody has been explained what their role is. And I don't need to go and tell the bowler every time what and how should he be bowling the next ball, because if I do that, then he will expect me to tell him how he should be bowling the next ball rather than using his own brain. So probably that's a similarity that I see, which comes when we are coming to know more about Venkat as a captain.
Fair enough. I thought Dhoni would go and advise the bowler when the bowler required it. And we've had instances, especially the two people that you mentioned, both the back of the hand spinners. I think they needed him. They needed that particular input at that point of time. How Dhoni sensed it and then went and said it is, of course, he's of course a legendary person when it comes to, in terms of captaincy, the right word at the right time and brevity. That's about sums both of them up.
Out of the four of us who are here, me, Bashir, Ravin, and Ranga, I think Ranga is the one who's bestowed with maximum knowledge about Venkat. Not because they belong to the same state originally, but even otherwise, I think Ranga has a lot of dope on Venkataraghavan. So Ranga, all yours.
Thanks, Jitu. Madhu, while talking about the corporate exposure of Venkat, I think maybe it just slipped out of your mind that one of the assignments you didn't mention has something in common with my passion and that is called Enfield India. I rode a bullet for a very long time, and I believe Venkat had a wonderful stint with Enfield India, also one of his great corporate stints. But you mentioned something in your introduction, and that was about baptism by fire. Okay, you would have been exposed to him from a younger, maybe from your college days, and you would have been following him from your school days, and maybe you met him while you were in college, and you were already playing in the TNCA has a very structured league. You have first division, second division, and so on, and a lot of things happening on the cricket front in Tamil Nadu. So you would have been exposed to him even earlier. But when you earn your Ranji Trophy cap and you go to play your first match for the state, there must be a very, very different kind of a feeling. Whoever the captain, whoever your teammates, you already had some extraordinarily great bowlers and batsmen in the team. Some great openers, excellent middle order batsmen, great spinners, and also pacemen, everybody. But when you make your debut under Venkat, what happens to the butterflies in the stomach? And what happens to you as you progress in the game? What did you go through? That baptism by fire is something I want to understand.
Yeah, now baptism by fire, I meant only the first instance when I played, the first time I played first division cricket. And in fact, it was Tony Adams who first took me to Venki, introducing me, saying, and till then I played only fourth division. And Tony had told me at the beginning itself to be very confident. Of course, he pumped me up and said, easily you can play first division. So the moment asked, Venki said, you've been playing fourth division. Do you think you can play first division? And I said, no problem. And he gave me a real, a stare, a look. He thought this fellow is either mad or he must be really confident. So that was the stage. And see, another thing is first impressions matter. So the first league match we played was against one of the strongest teams from Chennai at that time, Alwapet Cricket Club. It was sponsored by TVS. I was later on I joined them as well. They were, and Venki was very, very, about the particular match. He was extremely serious. He hated losing to them. I mean, in a competitive way, that is. So that match was a very, very. In fact, I think we lost about 4 or 5 wickets earlier, and then we had a century partnership. Both of us got 50s, and we managed to get the first innings lead against All Up. I got 3 wickets, held a couple of catches. So I think for me it was very easy. The first match that I played, I did reasonably well. And the first Ranji Trophy match, the same thing happened. Of course, as you know, I'll come back to the issue of butterflies in the stomach. Yes, it is true. You are the first thing that comes is, am I, fit enough for this arena? Do I belong there? That issue is something that you have to settle with yourself. The other thing is, all this happens outside the boundary line. It is all before the match starts. And once you step into the field, I think everything just disappears. It's you, your concentration, and that is where, this heightened sense of concentration to the point where you remain confident. You don't become ultra nervous or anything of that kind. That helps. And again, in my debut, I got 96 against Hyderabad, and two people there. In fact, Moses and Jabbar. Moses was a person who, throughout my graduation, in fact, we played universities together. He was a sort of an elder brother, and Jabbar throughout my cricketing career. So these two people, specifically in terms of batting, and since I had a lot of partnerships with them, they were really a wonderful sort of support, which helped me throughout my career. So as far as once you do get off a reasonable start, I did get a couple of wickets. I held a couple of catches, as happened in the league match. So I think probably Venki said, okay, this guy has got it. After that, I just had to be careful that my standards don't drop. And as they did, on a couple of occasions, he did pull me up. But I was prepared. I was ready for it. It's a question of how you react to it. You may find it a bit tough. You may find it a bit strong. But then, it's for your own good. Once you realize that, I think it's easier.
You're mute, Ranga.
Which position were you fielding in your first Ranji game? Were you very close to the captain?
No, I was in the outfield, and later on I fielded in all positions. In fact, since you mentioned fielding positions, and there is one thing which I think you will find interesting now. I personally, I found the most difficult position to field when Venki was bowling was at slip. I fielded at short leg as well. See, the problem with the thing is he had a leg cutter that so very well disguised, and that's why he got so many batsmen. It will just straighten off the wicket, and that will come to you like a bullet. And but he would, whenever he made me, and so many other people, when he made us field at slip, he would be very, very, very concerned whether we were staying down. In fact, a couple of occasions I have noticed him in his run up, he'll stop and then say, "Keep down." So the moment you did what he said, "Keep down, keep watching," and your movement that is required. Although the ball used to really zip, you would be very comfortable placed, and you could hold those catches. That's the most difficult thing. Short leg, and yes, I mean each position has it. It all varies with each particular catch. But there, at least back pad, you had a fraction of a second, whereas in slip you didn't have. It just zipped through.
Madhavan, I have a question to you. In fact, it's come from a friend on Facebook saying that what kind of variations that Venkat used to bring into his bowling. Why I would like to pose this question to you is because you yourself are also a bowler. And I am sure you must be watching somebody like Venkat very, very closely to see how is he bowling, what is his, where is his hand going, where is his fingers going. Okay, and when he does something like that, what happens with the ball when after it gets it hits the deck? So anything that you observed which was different, like you just mentioned, there was this special one that he would bowl and it would come very sharply to the slips. Some other variations that you actually observed and probably tried to imbibe into your own bowling itself?
Yeah, certainly. First thing I would like to say is there is a sort of a perception that Venki was a sort of a negative sort of a bowler, and that he had to keep it tight. And I've seen this phrase. He was the third spinner, and he used to come in only to when the two other bowlers had thing, or he had to keep things. I think this is in my personal opinion. This is not right. Venki was a very, very aggressive bowler throughout his career. Okay, and there are several ways. See, he had height, which means his parabola was not the same as Bishan Singh Bedi or Prasanna. So it had to be different. And secondly, just because a person is more accurate, that doesn't mean he's not experimenting. It doesn't mean he's not plotting the And in fact, with left-handers, I think many of you would have noticed, especially Kalicharan, Gomes, and all that. He used to feed them on the square cut a couple of times, allow them to get the boundaries, and I've seen him get it 96 if I remember right. People like Kalicharan, and then there would come that ball, that from outside the off stump it just zips through and castles them. So he used to work on that. And another thing is he was not negative, and he used to vary a lot in terms of the pace at which he bowled. Some would be slower in terms of it depends on what the match situation was. As the ball gets older, you will find probably the loop a little bit more, and a little bit it'll hang a bit in the air. And those variations, in fact, I remember one Ranji Trophy match where he got I think Mohinder Amarnath close to his 100, putting a fielder in short mid on. Those days, short mid on was not a very, people that later on only after Shane Warne and others came in, or the short mid on position was, people knew there was such a spot. He got him there in the 90s. So he was a schemer as much as any of the other spinners. And he had variety. He would vary the turn. Like even for right-handers, you will find that he would allow them to play forward, even a couple of drives or whatever, and then that would come that ball with that extra bite and the extra turn, and you will find especially forward and backward short leg waiting for the bat pad catch or this thing.
Great. Ranga, anything else you would want to know? I'm sure you have a lot of questions. and I liked Ranga, the way you posed that question, the last question that you posed. It was more from a management perspective than a cricket perspective. Okay. It was a very sharp question that you asked, that where were you standing in your first match under Venkat? Were you close to the captain? I think there's a very deep meaning to that entire thing that you have asked. And you're mute. Ranga,
Why
you're mute.
yeah. Can you hear me now? Yeah, okay. Why I asked that particular question specifically to Madhu was, great captains tend to take people under their wings, especially when they are beginning their career. But at the same time, knowing Venkataraghavan, a man not very, very outwardly emotional, not emoting outwardly and things like that. And Madhu said that more than once, that you needed to go to him to ask him for help. He was not going to come and tell you at the end of every ball. You are not a club cricketer anymore. You are a state level player, you are a zonal player, and you're likely to become an international player. So I guess it was with that perspective you got that. But there is one game which both I don't know. I don't think Madhu you had made your Ranji debut at that time because I'm talking about the year 1979, and this was a very interesting game. There's a huge debate about this most often, and whenever the subject of captaincy comes, whenever the subject of winning comes, whenever the subject of chasing comes, this game is discussed. I think offline, you and I were having a chat about it the other day that England, and this was the game at the Oval, 1979. India were one down anyways, and they needed to chase 430 odd, 438 if I'm not mistaken. And after a steady start, Gavaskar really got going, and a lot of runs had been piled up. And at one stage, the game looked well within sight and that you could have a go at it. But then there came a stage when maybe a couple of changes in the batting order, Vichy probably approaching the evening of his career, maybe, or not really right in the beginning, and with an explosive young new batsman called Kapil Dev available, and then Yashpal Sharma and various other people. Had Karsan Bhai been with us, I would have asked him this question too, because Karsan Bhai was not out along with Bharat Reddy probably when the innings closed. But something happened at one stage when the game was almost within our grasp. The game was drawn. We were a couple of wickets away, and we were only about 8 or 9 runs away when the game finally ended. Mike Brierley, of course, resorted to a certain amount of gamesmanship. You would have been a not exactly a Tamil Nadu Ranji Trophy player, but as an active player, you must have followed this game very closely. A lot of questions were asked about Venkat, and certain incidents happened immediately after that series, which signaled the end of his captaincy. Your take on this?
Well, it's always very. It's easy to be wiser after the event. I mean, any walk of life in any decision that every person makes. But I think to be fair, you need to judge every decision based on things as they stood at that point of time and what your resources were. And I know how you went about it. Was it the reasonable? Was it logical for you to do it? Well, in this case, if I remember right, when the mandatory over started, we needed over 100 runs. Of course, 5.5 or so is not as easy as it is today. But still, but then you had 9 wickets in hand, and normally Vichy was number 4. I'm sure Vichy didn't like it either, and I've gathered this later on. This is a thing that comes up every time when a run chase is talked about. Whenever you have a group of cricketers, and then you talk about Australia when we chase and England when we chase, this thing does come up, and there are different perceptions and views. And some felt, in fact, I've had close friends of mine telling me we probably should have gone ahead and attacked, right? Even if we had lost the game. I mean, this is debatable, arguable. But look at facts as they stood. You are looking at about 5.5 runs. You have 9 wickets in hand. Instead of sending Vichy, sending Kapil there. Okay, now you can argue if Kapil had got 20, 30 quick runs, don't you think the entire scenario would have changed? And Kapil was not a plodder. He was a person who could probably hit a couple of sixes and a couple of boundaries, which would make it easier on two accounts. One is you get closer to your target, and don't forget they had one bowler less. I think that medium pacer Hendrick or somebody was injured, and you had two spinners bowling the line. And what more thing would prompt you to send Kapil then? A couple of sixes, a couple of boundaries. The whole thing would have changed in India's favor. And even after Kapil, of course, didn't potter along. He, I think, 2 or 3 balls, he got a single and then he was out. But that didn't change. You still had the next person who went in was Yashpal. I may be wrong in this order, and Vichy came after that. I think that created more thing. Maybe Vishy at that stage, and Vishy again was, I mean, all of us know what a phenomenal stroke player. And another thing is he could do it without taking risks. He doesn't have to slog or anything. He was such a great player. So, I mean, in hindsight, I would say, I think as far as sending Kapil in, I wouldn't have done anything different. And I don't think it's fair to fault him on this. And sometimes all plans don't go as the way you want it. And here the repercussions were such, and we know what transpired. He lost the captaincy and all that. I don't know whether it is to be attributed to this particular instance or so. I don't think so. I think selectors being what they are would have had a huge, data to take a decision, and you go by whatever they do. So I think it was the right decision at that point of time. It just didn't, and I'm reminded of one day game in Pakistan where Srikanth is a less lot thoughtful, or he was more instinctive, whereas Venkataraghavan was a schemer. Now, he sent Chetan Sharma. I don't know whether it was in India or Pakistan. He promoted him up the order in a one-day game, and he got 100, and we won comfortably. Now, if Chetan Sharma had got out second ball or so, I think he would have, with the same criticism that was levied against Venki for sending Kapil in, would have ensured. But now they said it was a great, wonderful decision. What a decision. So I think, and knowing Venki, he would have just brushed it aside and taken it in his stride, as he always does.
Okay, very good. Excellent. Before we move to Bashir for the next question, there's one more interesting one which has come on Facebook from the same friend of mine, Ajoy, who's in Australia. And he's an avid cricketer himself, and he's working very hard to get an Indian 50-plus team in place. And now that I know many of us, probably the next time around, we are going to help Ajoy to to find better players. He has a very, very particular question, and it's very interesting because Venki, besides being a bowler, had been a captain of India, and at the same time he was also an umpire. So this question is to do with all the three roles that he has played actually, and he was a good fielder too. So the question is that with the recent legalization, I would say, or the approval of mankading a batsman. Okay, when the non-striker is out of the crease, and the bowler in his bowling action itself runs out a batsman, something which was long buried and dead, and then again brought to life again by another Tamil Nadu player, Ashwin, recently. What do you think would Venkat's thought process be with respect to mankading a batsman?
It's a very interesting question. The truthful answer is I don't know how exactly he would perceive it. But if you want, I can tell you what my opinion is. I think it's ridiculous. A non-striker steals 3 yards. Would you do that with the batsman? Wicketkeeper, I know it's a gentleman's game. The first time he stumps him, he says, no, 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 please have another go. Does he do that? I find it ridiculous. He's got to run those 20 odd, and we are talking about professional. This is not, a Saturday afternoon village cricket that we are talking about. We are talking about professional cricket with, a lot attached to it. And why go back to this? You break the law, there is a repercussion, sir. I don't find any reason why a non-striker. Is he a kid who doesn't know the rules? I find the whole, and I am, to be honest, I find it ridiculous that very, very senior and great Test cricketers talk about warning. Why should he be warned? Does the wicketkeeper warn the batsman, saying you are standing outside? Next time I will stump you. I find no difference between the two. It's either the striker or the non-striker. And why do you give him an unfair advantage? Would you do the same when he reaches the other end? If he is 2 inches short, you will say no, no, let him go this time. Next time we will claim and get him run out. I find it ridiculous, honestly.
Great. I really appreciate your honest opinion on this. I really appreciate this. Bashir, your memories about Venkat, and if you have anything to ask of Madhavan.
I mean, one question which I wanted to ask, which Madhavan has already answered. I mean, I also was under the impression that he was a little defensive. He could have been probably more aggressive, but then you said no, he was aggressive. But the impression we got as spectators was that he wasn't aggressive enough, And the second thing is, why did he not? He could have flighted the ball more. Why did he bowl so flat?
No, there's a difference in the trajectory between somebody like me who's 5 foot 5 or 6 and somebody who's a lot taller. That itself is a limitation in terms of what is the parabola that you can adopt. So for him, because he was a bit taller, and secondly, each person's style approach is unique. And Venki was very aggressive. Let me set that at least in our group at rest. One of the most see the problem is, would you call Padmakal Shivarkal defensive? Would you call Rajinder Goyal defensive? No, they were all very aggressive, very
Attack bowler.
penetrating. They were
Yes.
as thoughtful and as scheming as Bedi and Prasanna. But there is when the ball is thrown up into the air, no, there is a certain I don't know what word to use. That and then even for these people, the ball did a lot in the air. It was not very visible. That was it. But on the field, people knew. And there's one more thing. I mean, not exactly related to a query, but I'll bring it up now. See, there is a. I felt that people who brought the ball in, especially off spinners to right-hand batsmen, they didn't get what they deserved. I'm not talking in terms of wickets or whatever. In terms of how many times they bet the bat. Okay, whenever a leg spinner or a left arm spinner bowls to a right hander, just imagine he's beaten by turn. All the wicket keeper, the close in fielders, the entire set of fielders, outfielders, the entire crowd, their arms will be up. Whereas the same thing an off spinner does. But what happens is it hits the pad and bounces off. So nobody
Right.
thinks anything of substance has occurred. Whereas the same thing has occurred. He has beaten the bat. So, and the other aspect is in terms of LBWs. See, ever since
Yes.
Hawkeye came in, batting off the front foot. When you play off the front foot, you are given out. And earlier, typically it was the English thing of just put your foot left foot forward and you would never be given LBW. So there also I felt Venki had about 1,000, if I remember right, less than 1,400 first class wickets. I'm sure it would have been closer to 2,000, not only for him, for the other greats as well, Prasanna and all others, because those days you put your foot forward, there's no question of even thinking of will it go, and he
Yeah.
want to hit the stump. So as far as trajectory, that was the reason, and there even in the trajectory he did modulate a bit. It is not obvious because it was not such a high trajectory, and he couldn't because two things. One is it to be a full toss, or even if he was able to, a batsman would have enough of thing to go down the wicket or whatever, and then counter it. Whereas for a shorter person, he was able to, you could use that height over there effectively.
Okay. My next question is about you. I remember as a young boy, used to come to Bombay during vacations and play underhand cricket with a tennis ball. How was that experience? How would you compare it with a normal cricket ball overhand batting experience?
So, Bashir, you actually made him play that terrace cricket of Bombay, the famous
Yeah,
terrace
he used
cricket
to
of
play.
Bombay.
He used to play regularly. In
Yes,
fact,
yes.
people used to come looking for him. When there is a match, they would take him and go. He
Yes,
was
yes,
in
yes.
demand.
Yeah, it was very different. But the good thing about that is typically, I mean, every batsman has to watch the ball, till as the coach says, till it hits the middle of your bat. That particular aspect was more pronounced because it was not only the speed. Speed is you had to really bring your bat down very quickly. That was one. That speed, I think, was probably more than 100 miles an hour. I don't know. And of course, the fear of injury wasn't there, but it was all played with the tennis ball. The other thing is keeping your eyes on the ball till the last minute because I've seen people who could spin it yards. The amount of turn that they used to get was, unbelievable. So what had happened is it really sharpened two things. One is your reflexes, and also the basic trait of watching the ball right till it hits the middle of the bat, which is anyway very important for any particular batsman. And it was extremely competitive. It was fun but competitive, and it was a very different sort of an experience, a wonderful experience. And Bombay itself, Azad Maidan, Cross Maidan, when you find about 30, 40 teams playing in such a small place, it's a different perspective to cricket as it is played.
It's like a cricket factory. Okay, before I move on to Ravin, one thing that I wanted to ask you, and it's related to the question that Bashir asked. Did you find any difference in Venki, the bowler, in a test match vis-a-vis Venki, the bowler, in a Ranji Trophy match?
I think this is an excellent question because when it comes to Ranji Trophy, he was the main bowler. So okay, there are a lot of people that said he was the third bowler. I don't think. See again, a person coming on second or third, it also depends on how the captain felt. Bowler X or Y would use the ball with a little bit of shine. Of course, Bedi was always the first because he had that vicious armor, and so it was a question of who had to bowl when. So coming, I don't think there was any difference. Probably I have not seen him much other than of course the lesser of TV those days. How he bowled in England and especially Australia and England and maybe in wickets where you don't get a bit of purchase. This I just have to hazard a guess. I think he was probably a bit quicker in the air where he couldn't. But sometimes on a flat wicket, bowling quicker in the air only makes it easier for the batsman to hit you. So I don't think there was much of a difference because when you've seen him bowl in India playing Test cricket as well, I'll give you a typical case of Kim Hughes. That was one thing I was mentioning you about how he schemes, and this was a case sadly where he didn't get the Swarup Kishan was the umpire who didn't give him out. Everybody else in the stadium thought Kim Hughes was out. He went on to get 100, and that's another story. But this was a case where it was 2-3 overs. He just kept at it. It was almost like what to say, a routine sort of a thing without much. And then you had that one ball that was a bit slower in the air and a little bit more bite, and off the glove it went to short leg. So I don't think there was much of a difference. It was more a question of adapting to what circumstances were there. And since I have not played cricket abroad with him, so I really can't comment more on that. But my personal feeling is no. He was a person who could adapt to different wickets according to the pace of the wicket, the bounce that he got, and the match situation as well.
Great, thank you for giving us that insight. Ravin, anything that you would want to ask or talk about Venki to Madhavan?
One question I wanted to ask him. Venkataraghavan played under the captainship of Patodi as well as Wadekar also. Patodi somehow lacks confidence in Venki, and he always used to treat him as a replacement bowler, not as a the for first time bowler. So, but if you see his performance otherwise compared to all three, his performance was always better actually. He was, and if you talk about Wadekar, he used Venkat Raghavan very well actually. And in the 1971 series, he took, in 8 matches, he took 35 wickets at an average of 31. So I just wanted to ask him why it was like that, means why it is so. Uh, Under his captainship, the opinion towards Venkat was different, and in the captainship under Wadekar was different.
So it's a matter of perception, and of course, one would have to get into Patodi's mind to find out how he approached it. But one thing is very clear: no bowler can deliver unless the captain has confidence in him, and it makes a very very big difference. See, batting it's a different cup of tea. You're out there, you have two umpires and you have 11 fielders, and you only have your partner. So that's a lonely sort of a thing where you have it in it, you survive. Whereas in the case of bowling, there are a host of other factors, too many variables involved. And there, the most important thing is the confidence that the captain has in you. And that matters even not only for him, for anybody else for the in any class of cricket. Moment the captain says you can do the job for me, here is the ball, and whatever field or whatever that he gives or asks you, it makes a big difference. So, and I think to be honest, even with Prasanna, the same, it was the converse when Ajit Patekar was the captain, because after doing wonderfully well in if I remember right, Australia, he's written in his book that he was suddenly found that he was sort of sidelined or so. And then, but again, you have a pack, that was top drawer stuff, all four of them. So it is up to the captain to decide who would suit his interest best, and also whom he can get the best out of. So there is an element of subjectivity, and you just can't, what to say, avoid that question. Yes, whatever led to thing, only the concerned captain can, explain why. Why is it that he preferred X over Y? So, and that I think we can't speculate. It's up to the those persons involved to come out with it.
Absolutely, absolutely. It depends on the leader as to what he wants to extract out of his teammate. And he would probably, in his own mind, have the perceptions with respect to the strengths and weaknesses of each of his players. And probably also basis the situation which is there in the match. He would utilize the resources that he has at his disposal, and accordingly do what he thinks is right. Because at that time, you can't be getting into a conference of 11 players talking about what do we do next. It's the captain who kind of takes his calls on it. Ranga, coming back to you and your stories.
Firoz Shah Kotla, 1974 versus the West Indies. A gentleman suddenly gets elevated to captain position because the original captain is injured. The replacement captain falls ill. The third captain is asked to captain, but something happens, and suddenly this gentleman gets elevated to captain. He's told in the morning. He bowls, and there is this failure from the previous match at Bangalore. A man who got a duck and a four, and thanks to Eknath Solkar, had to beat a hasty retreat to the pavilion. He comes in at Delhi. He's batting on 12. He edges a ball from Venkataraghavan to Farooq Engineer. Everybody goes up in appeal. I can't remember the umpire's name at this point of time. I think Shambhupan had retired and maybe it was Swaroop Krishnan. I'm not too sure. That doesn't really matter. Do you think that particular delivery would have swung a lot of things in favor of this right arm off spinner who was relegated to the position of 12th man in the next game?
Yet it would appear so. Because the incident I told you about Kim Hughes was later when Vicky was making a comeback and he was bowling so well. It was at Madras, we were all watching. And for a bowler, especially at the right time, a wicket falling, as they say, you smell blood, the confidence level really soars. I mean, not that he needed any such external sort of a thing, but then it does make a difference when you get your wickets. End of the day, it's the wickets that count. This is very true. And then if only had given out, I doubt whether history would have, I mean, probably you can't deny Richard's greatness. He would have come good in some other thing subsequently.
Sure.
But it would
Sure.
have made a very, I think it would have made a very big difference because I don't
Because he
think
got
he stopped with that.
100 yeah, because he got 180 extra runs.
Yeah, 191 or 192. Yeah, I don't
He
know.
got 182. He was on 12. So
Yes.
180 extra, and that 180 could have bridged the gap as it was an innings victory for them
Yes.
against India. And Vivian Richards, after that, never looked back.
Look, yeah.
And so this is something which, because we were all watching it live and were absolutely aghast because from whichever corner of the field, we were in the royal stands, we couldn't afford the pavilion class tickets.
Right.
Even from there, it looked like one of those freak incidents of life, I guess. So this is one thing that has bothered me.
Yeah,
And
uh,
yeah, sorry. I think the last question that I want to ask Madhu, he's seen him from various perspectives. Captain, bowler, a zonal captain, a selector, a coach, an administrator, an office bearer of Tamil Nadu Cricket Association. But one of the most important and most highly respected roles, that of an elite panel umpire, the top 8 umpires in the world. I know it's very difficult to read anybody's mind, and reading Venkat's mind probably may be even more complex. But if you could peep into his mind, which role do you think he would have enjoyed the most?
I think the umpire's role. I'll give you my reasons as well. I could be wrong. I mean, I'm just, I'll explain why as well. See, it's a very lonely job. It's a very, very tough job.
Yeah.
And the factors that really appealed to him, those that he took as a challenge, and he expected every other fellow cricketer to do. That is in terms of intense levels of concentration. All that manifested. And as an umpire, I don't have to tell. People who know that it's every minute. You can't even take your. You can't pause. Even during the breaks, you have to keep track of certain things in terms of what is happening to the ball and all that. So I think that job, he always loved a challenge. He would never back down. And the other aspect about him is he was very, very well prepared for it. I'll just give you a very small thing which will give an insight as to how how he prepared himself for whatever he did. That was in terms of the laws. And there was when I was just doing my, I was an article clerk doing my CA thing. We had one instance where we were discussing something about tax, and then this was when the Tamil Nadu Ranji Trophy team was traveling, and then he quoted the particular section, and then told me as well that I know the entire thing. So he was not an income tax practitioner or a chartered accountant, but then when probably some aspect of his business he had this the urge as well as the motivation to be a master of the particular situation. So I'm sure. I mean, I don't have to mention about cricket, the loss of cricket. He would have, really swallowed it, digested it, dissected it, did everything with it, as he did with everything else. So that is one thing that stands out in him. No half measures anywhere. You take up a job, you do a bloody good job of it. Give it 100%. And one aspect of it is you've heard so many people, talk in not so very flattering terms about him. I've never found him say one word about any other, even to get a word about somebody which is not so. He wouldn't just respond with just half a smile or so, and then he'll brush it aside. Very rarely would he, even if he came out with something negative, it would be extremely objective. Unfortunately, this particular trait of his hasn't been, spoken about. He never had. I don't think he had any ill will for anybody. Okay, on the field, sometimes he could be harsh by normal standards, but that's about it. I've never seen. He's never. I don't think he had any sort of ill will when it came to other people. Probably when they didn't measure up, he behaved in a manner that gave rise to certain, perceptions and interpretations. So on the whole, I think his thing was whatever you do it well, and whatever you need to learn to enable you to do it well, you do a bloody good job of it. So I think umpiring coming. To the question. Of course, bowling. That was, of course, his. I somehow I felt he never did justice to his. He was a very what to say, well equipped, talented batsman. But my personal thing is he was not very serious about it. So and rare occasions when you could see how he could bat. He's got 250s in first in Test cricket. He's got 100 in Ranji Trophy and a few other good knocks as well. So I probably feel umpiring after his cricketing. The playing days were over. It was just the right thing for me. It was good also that former players took up umpiring at that stage because the umpire was then the profile of an umpire was quite different from after Winky, became an umpire, especially in the Indian context. So I think that was probably the best thing for him.
Great, Madhavan. I think we've had a great session today talking about the great Venkat. Before we conclude, I must mention this that you mentioned yet another great name, a player who probably did not get his due because probably born at the wrong time. Padmakar Shivalkar, the great spinner who played for almost 20 years for Mumbai or Bombay rather, and was as good as anybody else on this land, and he could have probably walked into any team across the world in of any of the countries, but unfortunately he never played for India an official test match. And I'm happy to share with you that we're going to have Padmakar Shivalkar himself for our next Sunday's program, and he's going to be there, and we're going to talking to him about his cricketing life, his cricketing career, and also I believe that he's a very good singer, and in fact, he's pursued his singing to the level of making it his profession. And he has his own orchestra, and he sings. He's now 80 years old, and I hope he's going to entertain us as well next Sunday. So, Madhavan, I'm going to invite you again to be a part of this team. So that we can have a very nice and interactive session with him. But before we close today's episode, if you were to, I think, Bashir, you want to ask something more?
Yeah, you were talking about Shivalkar. I don't know. I feel on a turner, he would probably be more devastating than Bedi. I mean, would Madhavan agree with that? On a turning wicket, he would have been absolutely devastating, much more than Bedi. This is what I feel, and a lot of other people feel. So, what is your Shivalkar?
Yeah, probably. What you say, there's some what is the substance to what you say, because he would hit the track rather than flight it. and the chances of scoring would be that much less. But then Bedi also has been quite effective on Turner. So it's definitely a thought. And I couldn't disagree. I think probably yes. What you say is probably true.
So can we sign off by having two Tamilians talk about the third Tamilian?
அவருக்கு இன்னைக்கு கூட மோர் குழம்பு தயிர் வடை பிடிச்சிருக்கா?
Oh, definitely. I think so. Yes.
Okay, I'll translate it for all the Hindi speaking
Yes.
guys. बचपन में एक तमिल मैगजीन में मेरी मम्मी ने पढ़ के मुझे सुनाया था कि मद्रासी ब्राह्मण अयंगार है हम लोगों की तरह, जैसे मारू है, जैसे मैं हूँ, कि उनको ये जो मद्रासी कड़ी जो होती है वो उनको बहुत पसंद है. तो फिर माधु ने मुझे बताया कि वो तो पसंद है ही आज भी, लेकिन उसके साथ दही भल्ले भी बहुत पसंद है. सो दैट मेक्स फॉर अ टिपिकल टैम ब्रैम, एंड दैट इज प्रोबेबली वेयर द लेग कटर केम फ्रॉम. So that's it.
Great. I think it was a great interaction. Enjoyed it, and we are going to have more of them. Inviting everybody to come and watch us every Sunday at 5 o'clock for Cricket Chai Chit Chat. And we promise you to get more and more stories on more and more cricketers. And as and when possible, we are going to bring in cricketers who can add value to the discussion that we are doing as fans. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thanks, especially Madhavan,
Thank you.
For being here. It is a great time spent with you. Thank you very much, and thanks Ranga, thanks Bashir, thanks Ravin. Till we meet again next Sunday.
Thank you.
With
Thank you very
most probably Mr. Padmakar Shivalkar himself being present in the program. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
It was
Bye-bye.
great.
Bye.